Well, welcome back to the Ink Live. So happy to see folks joining on a Monday. I am very happy to be back with the amazing Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat. We've missed a few of these. I've definitely felt the absence. I had some scheduled things. You had some scheduled things. But now we're back.
We're back.
It's Monday. And fascism is still on the march. So nothing, yeah. So, that's true. But I met Ruth, I met someone yesterday who said something to me that I really liked. It was talking a little bit about it. It was actually a state senator here in New York. And he was talking about some of these things you and I do and some of these other lives. And he said, "You're just helping me make sense of it." And this is the guy who's like a leader in the government in New York. And he was just like, it's just so much to make sense of. Just like what is happening? Why is this happening? And so I feel every time we do these, I feel like we get to at least participate in helping people make a little bit of sense. How are you, first of all?
I'm good. But that's, the reason we feel a need to make sense of things is I just want to, I've said this before, but we haven't been together for a while. What we are living through is historic, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a historian. The pace.
Ruth, there you go again, calling things historic.
Sorry. But the pace of, and this is said in a spirit of empathy, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about. The pace at which things are happening is not even comparable to the start of the regimes that we hear about that are Turkey and Russia. The early months did not look like this. The scale of the wrecking of government, just everything going on, the war on trans, the war on children, all the wars, plus, okay, we're supposed to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, all of that stuff. This has all happened in like 90 days. So many people, certainly foreign policy officials worldwide, are struggling to make meaning of the sudden and wrenching abandonment of America from any kind of democratic positions. So I'm really, every time we come together, and you've been educating people with your lives in general, I think it's hugely needed right now.
Right? Maybe you're gonna tell me I'm wrong about this, and I'm willing to be wrong about this. But politics in general, and certainly this kind of authoritarianism that Trump represents, is so much about projection and optics and the ability to make people feel certain things and to project certain things. And as terrible as everything is, it does seem to me, just paying attention to the last few days, that there is a weakness and defensiveness and demoralization that I see in Trump 3+ months in, that I think is notable. And you can sometimes, like the frog in the boiling pot, fail to notice the change. But people were looking at it. I was on Morning Joe today looking at his Meet the Press clips, and he's people are laughing at it, but he's like, well, little girls may have fewer dolls this year. And it's sort of a, it's a meme, it's a joke about how out of touch he is. But if you just step back, this is not the swaggering American transformation of January, of his inaugural, right? This is now a guy who's very defensive about the fact that people are feeling pain, who's literally explaining to Americans that they may not be able to have Christmas presents, who seems, there's just I just smelled a weakness there, and a lack of that swagger. And I wonder if you're seeing that too, and what you think about it.
Oh, yeah. And the reason that he is posting himself as Pope, yes, it's a distraction, but it's because he feels that authoritarians they become more grandiose when they feel more empowered because people capitulate to them. But they do stuff like that. when they are feeling a little bit threatened, or he knows he's not in full command of himself. I'm sure he didn't even intend to talk about dolls. And you can imagine his advisors going, what's he saying? Right? Talking about dolls. But he's also, I'm not saying this in any sympathy for him. This he's living through this situation that he himself uh, facilitated, but Doge has become like this hostile takeover of increasing large amount of the U.S. government. And although Musk said he's stopping back, there's just a lot going on that he perhaps is not fully um, in control of. He's benefiting from it and profiting from it, and that's what he cares about most. So it's a very dynamic situation, and sometimes such dynamic situation can get out of control, even for the leader. So I think he feels a little unstable.
Yeah.
Again, totally his fault, but I saw that in the way he reacted to the Meet the Press interview and in the Meet the Press interview.
I guess yeah, that makes sense. I think part of what I'm suggesting, and I, I don't want this to be like the just world bias or like an empty desire for hope, but I do feel like there's a certain amount of gravity. Like there's a way in which you can think of him as Teflon, or like the rules don't apply to him. And it's sort of my feeling now is a little bit like the rules are sort of applying to him. Like he's lost
Uh-huh.
a bunch of popularity because he made the stock market go down. Like he's not in this like otherworldly state that I think sometimes we imagine him to be in, where like nothing works, nothing sticks. Like things are sticking. He's bleeding popularity because he's making dumb choices that hurt people. I just wonder whether you look at this and feel like, okay, like the hydraulics of a relatively normal system, where if you fuck up and make people's lives worse, you are punished for it. At least some of that seems in motion,
Yeah.
and it's not just like uncritical adulation. It's not North Korean applause. Like the hydraulics are still happening.
Yeah, and he's faced a ton of defeats at the hands of judges. And yes, I mean, rightfully, there's been attention to the capitulations of the law firms and everybody else, but there's been a lot of people who haven't capitulated. But he's actually had over 100 defeats at the hands of the courts, and there's a very robust legal resistance. And then, most of all, yes, the tariffs thing, which he wanted, he imposed. It's having blowback. Now, we haven't gotten to the point yet where the people who should be speaking out, the big economic elites who backed him, they haven't been speaking out yet in numbers. But he knows this perfectly well, and so I think he knows these laws of power, and so there was a certain emptiness when all he has to pull out of his pocket for Kristen Welker is, the bad parts of the economy are Biden and the good parts are me. It sounded like I know he speaks at a fifth grade level in his tweets. He used to on purpose, but that's very feeble. And that's not going to hold. I mean, I think it's going to be, I've been talking about this in my newsletter, Lucid, for months. There's going to be a reckoning. That's what I'm calling it. That people, as things when the shelves start getting empty and their Social Security checks don't arrive, and government falls apart, things we're used to being in a functional state, then there'll be a reckoning. And he knows this and he fears it, because fear is what motivates autocrats most of all.
So we have a vigorous chat here.
Yeah.
So as always, we love your comments. We can see them as we go. So please, if you have questions, comments, I'd love to know right now. What do you think? Do you sense that gravity is applying to Trump? Do you sense that some of those kind of normal pushes and pulls actually apply to him? He's maybe not as special as sometimes we fear. Um, or do you still see kind of this invincibility? Um, Ruth, can we talk about love and empathy?
Oh, yes.
So I had this interview last end of last week with Dr. Abdul El Sayed, who's running for the Senate in Michigan, as you know. And he's someone I met some years ago, I think, and was quite struck by. And then we had this interview again last week, and I don't think I've done this in a long time, but I was so moved by it that I wrote an entire essay about the interview afterward, which normally, normally you just let the thing speak for itself. Um, but the reason I did was it struck me that he was offering a new playbook, a kind of new package that was in many ways challenging lots of different conventional wisdom out there. So I wanted to just, summarize that for folks who hadn't seen it and then get your thoughts. He said a lot of things, and I kind of broke it down in the column into sort of seven different propositions that I thought were interesting. But summing it all up, I think what he was suggesting is radical empathy for um, for Trump voters and radical change in terms of policy. Now, these might both sound terrible to you, or great to you, or basic. But just to say a word more about each, I think he's challenging a lot of the way Democrats are showing up in this moment on each of those points. When he talks about radical empathy for Trump voters, he is talking about not doing the thing that a lot of us do. I feel guilty of. I see a lot of our chats when we do these lives. A lot of you all are guilty of this too. The deep anger and contempt and resentment and rage that half this country feels at the situation the other half of the country has gotten us into, often our own siblings and cousins and friends and neighbors. No one's in a mood to forgive. No one's in a loving place about this. No one's opening their arms, right? People are pissed. There was an insurrection. Like, I get it. And you got this progressive in Michigan being like, you got to have open arms. You got to have open arms. He's not talking about like Klansmen, but he's talking about, tens of millions of people. You got to create a space in which people can come to, as he says, don't prove them wrong, help them get to right. Help them get to feeling right. So that's kind of challenging message for maybe a lot of progressives. And then he has this other message, which is you got to have real radical change. We can't fight the something of Trumpism with nothing. We can't keep offering vanilla. We can't keep offering bland, incremental policy. We have to offer real, thoroughgoing change. So the kind of radical empathy point cuts against a lot of the condescension that you see from some quarters of the left. I think the radical change point obviously cuts against the moderates and centrists and third way people who've tried to say, no, the way to beat Trump is sticking to the center, not doing too much, no jazz hands. And it's a really interesting package. And what it amounts to is a kind of a suggestion of openness and flexibility in posture to the right, but actually being quite strident in standing for big change. This is precisely the moment to offer something big, not the moment to stay small. I wonder how you kind of read those points around radical empathy and radical change, and what's the historical view?
Yeah, I've actually been writing about this for a couple of years. And I was so struck when I did the research for my book Strongmen, which first came out in 2020, that the Ekrem Imamoglu, the mayor of Istanbul, he came to power in an authoritarian state, Erdogan's Turkey, on a platform of radical love, which is very similar to radical empathy. When you look at there's even a little playbook that's a written thing. And one of the slogans, and I have this in my book, was you ignore Erdogan, but you love his followers. And so the way he campaigned against an Erdogan proxy, so it was it was very difficult for him to even be doing this. This is 2019. Is that he didn't want to stage authoritarian spectacle rallies. He went around and walked around Istanbul and he hugged people and he listened to them and he had open arms for Erdogan's supporters. And to Erdogan's horror, he won. And we don't have time to go through the whole thing, but he's continued to preach this in a more muted way. He doesn't use the word love as much right now, but now he's in jail. And he is such a threat that to stop him from running for president in 2028, and it's been going on many years, Erdogan doesn't know what to do with him because, the radical love is so strong. in his whole, he's a devout Muslim. He's what he calls a positive populist. That finally Erdogan had to put him in prison. Such is the power of radical love. So I've been writing about this in op-eds also for the LA Times and in Lucid for some years, because and so this was very almost cathartic to see Dr. El Sayed saying these things from his point of view. Right now, it's so important, so impactful. But there's a lot of wisdom and practice, anti-authoritarian practice, that goes into this. Where you don't condemn, you kind of embrace them, and yet at the same time you're providing something new. And that's the part I think Imamoglu wasn't. Turkey's in a very different place than us, and I totally embrace this idea. And it's also been working. A version of this has been the radically new thinking big stuff has been working in the Bernie and AOC tours,
Right.
Getting tens of thousands of people coming out in red states to hear something different that they have not been hearing on Fox News, and which strikes them as refreshing. And we're going to see, as things get very bad here by design, because Trump is in office to completely wreck America economically. They're trying to cause as much hardship as possible. It's very sad. It's tragic. There will be a receptiveness to this kind of thing. So Dr. El Sayed is not just on the right path theoretically. That I believe that the moment will be right. And I intend to talk as soon as my NYU semester is over. That's part of my summer project. I had decided long ago is talking about love and empathy. That's going to be one of my focus, because this is the
I
moment.
love that. I think you should write more about it. And I'll
I'm
give you
going
some other
to.
examples that are interesting, because you're right about Bernie and AOC. So let me give you an example with each of them. Again, people don't necessarily perceive these leaders this way, and this is interesting. Sometimes it's maybe their own fault, maybe it's the fault of how they're perceived, how they're portrayed. In my book, The Persuaders, there was a 100-page
Yeah.
chapter on AOC at the middle. One of the
Yep.
core lessons when she was a young organizer, college age or just beyond, was from a guy named Ernesto Nieto in Texas, and she did a lot of training with him. And I talked to him about the woman who would become his most famous student. And one of his big concepts was called the Golden Gate of Retreat, which AOC now talks about. And she had shared it with me and then kind of attributed it to Ernesto Nieto. So I went to the source and talked to him about it. And he said, I think he'd gotten it from his mentor in Texas, who in LBJ's time was doing, like, if I remember right, like door-to-door work around civil rights and implementation of programs, but like going into very hostile communities
Mm-hmm.
and like dealing with people one-on-one. And the idea of the Golden Gate of Retreat was you have to give people a face-saving way out. In other words,
Yes.
like Dr. Said
Yes.
saying, give them a way to get to right instead of show them that they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this is again, people don't see AOC this way. They see her as
Mm-hmm.
like the strong opinion having lady, which often says more about how our culture views women with opinions.
Yes, women.
Um, but she is deeply an organizer who has this notion of give people the Golden Gate of Retreat. And she actually doesn't. If you pay attention, I think she's actually careful about not demonizing regular people who vote for Trump and focusing
Mm-hmm.
the ire on Trump, which a lot of
Mm-hmm.
liberals get wrong. Another example is Bernie. Bernie, I remember talked about, and he got a lot of shit for it in 2020. He would really frame, let's say you voted for Trump. I understand you were doing this, you were doing this, you were trying this, you felt this. Maybe you made a mistake, right? And a lot of people were like, "You're giving them a pass." But again, it was this politics of give people
Mm-hmm.
that chance. And then here in New York, Zoran Mamdani is running for mayor. He did
That's
these
right.
fascinating ads. An ad in Queens where he interviewed a bunch of immigrants and brown people who spoke with
Yeah.
accents, foreign accents, in the middle of Queens, talking about why they voted for Trump. And then he revealed his platform, free childcare, free buses, whatever. And they were like, oh, that sounds great. And so I think we're seeing an interesting thing where some of these progressive voices who want really big sweeping social change are actually showing more mercy
Yep.
toward the right than more moderate people, and it's kind of interesting.
It is, and it's what Dr. El Sayed said: separate the bully from the posse. You target the bully, and one of the things I've always tried to do, and it's like a sub theme of strongmen, is the fragility of the strongmen, the weakness of the strongmen, and you can show that and show and offer something different, and that's very important. That's what all these people are doing, and not demonize the followers, because that just leads them to be more tribal, to retreat more. There's an interesting dynamic that when it's culled from not just studies of leader cults or cults in general, but also people who have been conned in financial, like in frauds. When they start, it's a kind of process for getting out of a false belief system, and when you start to realize that you've been conned, your initial reaction can be to retrench because you fear the shame.
And
You don't
lash
want to
out
be,
at the person bringing you
yes.
the
And
information.
and you don't want to be shamed because, and this is where the face saving comes in. Um, you have to give people a way to process it in their own time and not feel condemned if they're starting to realize that they might have made a mistake. I went through this with my mother, who voted for Brexit and then, regretted it. And that was back before she got all radicalized during the lockdown. I've gone through this twice with her, these cycles. But you have to tread very lightly. And this is something that this kind of process, this dialogue, is one that you would have with people who you see regularly, like family members or community members. But we have to remember that even when they start emerging from their disinformation bubble, or they start realizing that maybe Trump isn't who he said he was, there could be a period where they want to believe even more desperately, and if they get through that, then they're done. Um, but I really believe this reckoning. I love this word because it's a process. And if we manage this correctly, we can perhaps, have a different future for the country coming out of this nightmare.
Um, so I would love, again, in the chat, tell us what you think about this. Are you personally ready for
Good
love
question.
and empathy for uh, Trump supporters? There may be a
Love.
difference between you agreeing that it's necessary, or maybe you don't even agree it's necessary and strategic. But where are you in terms of thinking it's the right way to go and being personally ready to do that in your own life? We'd love to hear from you and see these chats.
And it's not easy, because it's not easy even to reconnect with some people in your lives who don't accept who you are, who consider you the enemy, or either for your political views or who you are as a person, who you've chosen to be politically. It's hard, but it's the only path, I think.
And am I wrong in suggesting that sometimes, um, when you want to talk about love and empathy and these kind of things, I don't know, it people dismiss it as
Oh
soft
yeah.
or unserious, or like we're talking about hard stuff like authoritarianism over here. Like, what is this little frilly
Yeah.
stuff of love and empathy? People don't take. Can you make the case for its seriousness in the context of a conversation like this?
Well, because it's worked. No, I know. I was able to put this discussion in my book in the resistance chapter because it was part of my book. But I shopped my op-ed around for I don't know, like a year and a half, and nobody wanted it. And eventually, the L.A. Times took it right before it got taken over by that right-wing billionaire. Or so. Um, the case is that it's worked before. It's versions of it. So I mentioned Turkey, where it propelled him to Imamoglu to prominence, such that he had to be arrested. He's like to stop him, because he's clearly the person who would be in a free and fair election, the head of state in Turkey, clearly. But a version of it worked in Poland, where they called the biggest march they had, the biggest demonstration since the end of communism. They chose to call it March of a Million Hearts. And what was the logo? The heart. And they talked about, and it was this was trying to get rid of the far right government that was demonizing immigrants, and hate crimes had risen. And it was also about reproductive rights and anti-corruption, but it was about dignity of the individual and solidarity to others, not this right-wing hatred. And that worked too. And there are other examples going back further in history, like Chile. They had a military dictatorship, and they had a March for Joy. So these are different terms, but that's in my book as well. And the act of coming together and showing solidarity for others. And the ads they had in Chile were like mothers, and these were groundbreaking television ads. Mothers who had their sons disappeared. And it brought empathy for those people. And it allowed people who'd been living terrified in a military dictatorship and being silent, and almost it's too scary and dangerous to have empathy. We know, look what's happening in our country now. Lawyers and others who help immigrants are being penalized and prosecuted and harassed. And that's what authoritarian states do. They go not only after you, they also go after the helpers. That's a kind of mainstay of authoritarianism. You go after the helpers to stop empathy.
Well, one thing that I'm very happy about is that you no longer are in a situation where some flunky at the LA Times is deciding which of your ideas the American public gets to experience.
Yeah.
So if you want Ruth's ungate-kept ideas, this is the button right here. Subscribe to Lucid, Ruth's excellent Substack that breaks us all down. Subscribe to the Ink if you haven't already done that. Ruth has to leave early today, but we have a very special guest who is going to do the second half of the show, Michael Cohen, who, of course, I think you've done lives with him before, Ruth, if I'm not mistaken. So Michael's going to be joining in a couple minutes. Can I ask you one more thing before you have to go? You'd written about moral collapse and the risk of moral collapse in a society like this. Where do you see us right now? We talked about the law firms, but there are these signs of people fighting back. The judges, Trump-appointed judges. There is, Columbia capitulating, and then there's also, Harvard fighting back. Where are we on moral collapse at this moment?
I think many people are in like a watch and wait. I think we're in also a period where, again, it's so quick and it's so new. It's only 3 months in. Like other countries don't have broad-based, morally based, huge resistance movements coming together in only 3 months. That's not how it works. And a lot of, look at Reverend Barber. He just got arrested. There's a lot going on now that is designed to fight moral collapse and offer something different. And so I think we're in a period of incubation, perhaps, and more people are going to, I think, join this.
Well, I hope you're right.
Happy note.
And on a happy note, I love that. Ruth, it is always so good to see you. I'm really glad we were able to resume this tradition. We're gonna keep it going, and so happy to see you as always.
Yes, I'm off to a NYU thesis defense on militias. So
wow.
Okay, good
Uplifting.
to see everybody.
All right,
hi, Michael.
Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Michael. We'll have to talk soon.
How you doing?
Good.
Good
All
to
right.
see you.
It's like a family reunion of people who believe in democracy.
Exactly. All right. Bye.
Bye, Ruth. Michael, buddy, how are you?
I'm hanging in there, my friend. Hanging in there. Another day, another crazy day, right?
Yeah, better to be hanging in there than hanging, I say.
Well, I listen. I agree with you on that one. Trying to adjust the old, the old camera here. So look, there's so much going on. It's almost like a juggler, right, in the circus. And I actually know how to juggle. Those are from my.
Do you?
Yeah, those are from my.
Could we maybe demonstrate at the end of the half hour?
I'm going to go get 3 eggs. And so, I'm not going to use the eggs. They're too expensive.
It's too expensive. Too expensive. Yeah.
Exactly. God forbid I drop them. And you don't know where to start. Do you start with the stupidity of taking what is now a museum in San Francisco, Alcatraz, and dumping billions of dollars into the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Prisons, all for what? In order to make a point because people know the name Alcatraz. One thing that Trump is missing is the fact that there are facilities in America that are known as supermax. There's one that's way, way, way out west. It's not even above ground. It's like 1,000 feet below ground, where the inmates that are there are the worst of the worst. They never see sunlight. They will die below ground in that facility. So what's the point to now go ahead and spend money when you're willing to spend billions of dollars on more incarceration, because this country incarcerates people more than any other country, to go ahead and to incarcerate more people when you're not willing to put the money into programs designed, let's say, to save the lives of children with cancer.
Well, hold on. But I think you said something, but right at the beginning of that point, you said something that I think is the key to the whole thing. And I'd love you to unpack this. You said, just because he knows its name, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a bigger key to understanding this guy's moves than maybe a lot of people realize. Like, even his cabinet, it was not like even the most loyal people or the most viciously whatever people. It was literally like people who he could remember offhand. It was like little celebrities. It wasn't even A-listers. It was just like, it was like people he saw recently. It's like when you have kids and you ask your kid, you name like 4 colors and you ask their favorite, they always say that just the last one you said.
Right.
So can you tell me about that kind of brain that's like, oh, Alcatraz, like I remember that word. Let's do something there. Like, how does that brain work?
I'm not bullshitting you on this. And I'm so glad that we have a nice-sized audience, because I want them to fully understand what I'm now going to say. I guarantee you, while he was on Air Force One, he was watching a movie like The Dirty Dozen or something, which is, in Alcatraz, one of those Alcatraz movies. And it just sparked something in him. And all of a sudden he has to talk about it, right? I mean, it's comical, right? It's not only is it comical, in fact, it's dangerous. What made him think about Alcatraz? And more importantly, where are the Michael Cohens around Trump now to say to him, let me just give you a valid reason for you to consider. You can never tell him yes or no. Well, yes, you could tell him, just not no, but you can certainly offer him other things. All right. So, for example, what can you say to him? Mr. President, there are, I believe, 20 Supermax facilities around America that are already in operation that are exactly what you're talking about. To bring Alcatraz up to that facility, to that type of a facility, would cost America several billions of dollars. Remember, Alcatraz has not been touched, not in its upgrades. Literally, since when? When did it close? In the late 60s? In 70? I mean, you're talking about 50 years. It's been a museum. And it's probably best to leave it as the museum, as the reminder of this is the kind of place that you go to. And if you really want to do something impactful in order to persuade people not to commit crimes, especially not violent ones, maybe what you ought to think about doing is putting out another one of those rule-style videos that you put out when you were showing the El Salvador concentration camp. That costs thousands, not billions. And that's certainly impactful. But he doesn't seem to understand, and nobody around him is willing to turn around and to tell him facts. Another big crazy issue, and for whatever the reason is, in my 15 years of being around Trump, I never heard him talk about tariffs and how he used to say America gets ripped off all the time by everybody. He doesn't understand. And somebody needs to draw for him what's known as the circular flow of economic activity. It's a very simple diagram. I mean, you can do it on one sheet of paper with a Crayola crayon. It basically, it's a circle, and it shows the endless cycle of how money and capital flow through the economy. He thinks, for example, and I used Vietnam as the example because Vietnam, of course, is the center of, for example, Nike when it comes to the production of their sneakers. We can never, ever have a equal trade with, for example, Vietnam. We also can never, ever have an equal trade with China. And there is the reason why. It's because this country, we don't manufacture shit, like nothing. The only thing I think that's fully manufactured in America is like those WeatherTech floor mats for your car. And I'm not even sure that the rubber comes from America itself. For all you know, it could come from overseas. My point is, he doesn't seem to understand that as the money moves through our economy, take, for example, a good that's bought in China. That good has to then be sold to a company. We'll call it a distributor. The distributor takes the product, puts it into a cargo container. The cargo container is an American. It's an American company that brings it to America. When it comes here, there is a tax, an import tax. There's a what do they call it? Like a destination tax. There's a port tax. And so again, money is flowing through the economy. Then, of course, the distributor is selling it to a wholesaler. The wholesaler then sells it to a big box. Meanwhile, the wholesaler takes that in as income, so it becomes part of their income tax that they pay to Uncle Sam every year. And then, of course, that wholesaler sells it to the big box. They take it in as inventory. But how about all the people that are transporting it? The transportation companies, the trucks, and so on, that bring it to the big box. Then you have the people that stock it and click it in. And then you have, of course, the people that are working in the big box. You have the people that are at the checkout, and so on and so forth. There is so much movement in one single item. More than 20 people actually touch it. More than 20
Okay, but can I tell you my theory of why?
Into your hands.
Let me tell you my theory of why he doesn't understand that. You again, knowing him firsthand and me not. But my theory is, and I've known some people in my life like this. I will say I've known some people in my life who, and I say this with great empathy, who are very wounded people, who have who carry a certain kind of ego wound that's very fundamental. Maybe they were abused growing up or something bad. And that I've known some people like that who try to read almost every situation in the world as, am I on top or am I on the bottom? Am I dominating or am I being dominated? Am I winning this one or am I losing this one? And there's some situations in life where that's a reasonable framework to look at it. You may make a good investor or on a hedge fund or something. But of course, if you approach parenting with that philosophy, you're going to be a terrible parent. If you approach being a friend with that philosophy, you're going to be a terrible friend. And I would argue, if you approach how the economy works and what happens when two countries trade, if you're looking for who's stepping on who's getting the better of who's top dog, and who's submitting, it's just a really, really limited framework for understanding something like the economy.
But let me just give you a pushback on that. because Trump does understand. He's not stupid. He may not be red, but he is far from stupid. How do you know who the top dog is? Because every single country in the world gets ranked by GDP. And our GDP, which of course is the economic indicator on, on wealth in the country, the movement of capital in the country, it's America by 2.5 times that of China. So we are the big dog, but what he just doesn't want to acknowledge is that 20 different hands, companies touch every single product that move in order to get it into the consumer's hands. And the notion that he wants to keep fighting with people like you and me and economists around the world, trying to explain to him and to the American people that it is the consumer who pays that tax, not the country of origin. And again, I just don't know why so many people keep falling for it. I had a conversation with a guy the other day. I was speaking at Yale University over the last 3 days. I think I had 7 different meetings and speeches at Yale. It was one of the most phenomenal experiences. I'm going back there. They're actually even talking about maybe making me into an adjunct over there. It was wild. And there were students, we're talking Yale students, that turned around and said that they agree with his tariff policy. And I said, but you do understand better than probably even I, all about economic principles. Yes, but somewhere along the line, they buy into that. And I try to expand upon it and to have them expound upon what it is that's making them believe what is fundamentally so inaccurate and wrong that 27 of 29 of the top U.S. economists have spelled it out in the most simplistic of terms, but they don't want to. They are all in. They're all in for whatever it is that Trump does, like a cold.
So I want to ask you, you were once in the cult and you got out. Your own story of how you got out is in some ways very particular and specific to you, and it's not necessarily the most replicable model, and I don't think you would wish that on people.
No, I don't.
But in some ways, we want millions and millions of people to have their own version of your transformation. And so at this moment when it's not just deporting some unpopular immigrants or doing other unpopular things, but it's really like hurting people's bottom line, hurting their stock market portfolio. Donald Trump is now going on TV telling American girls that they're not going to be able to have as many dolls this Christmas. Like, you're not winning in that moment. It feels like a very ripe opportunity. If Democrats were smart, if activists were smart, a ripe opportunity to help millions of people come to the awakening that you came to for your own reasons. How would you suggest Democrats and other organizers and activists make use of this moment, make use of the pain people are starting to feel, make use of the chaos, and actually not fuck it up and drive people even deeper into his arms, even deeper into the cult, even deeper into protecting him? How do you make use of this moment to pull people out?
So the way I would do it, if the DNC, who I find to be utterly stupid and incapable of messaging, you go to Anand Giridharadas, you go to Michael Cohen, you go to the Midas Touch Network, you go to Jim Acosta, you go to Don Lemon, you go to the top, say 1,000, not the top 10, right? Because everybody likes top 10. Go to the top 1,000 creators who are of similar mind to people like you and me. Create a 30-second spot, an advertisement showing, using 3-word slogans, which is what Trump always does. 3-word slogans: gasoline and groceries, lock her up, mass deportation now, build the wall. I can go on and on and on forever. Trump uses 3-word slogans. Do the same thing and mass pound it out there and let all 1,000 people get on board and keep restacking it, reposting it, and talking about it, and then contact every single Democratic member of Congress, as well as city councils, mayors, and governors, and send them the same ad and let them repost it, restack it, and so on. So in that way, like the the McDonald's jingle, everybody remembers it. Why? Even though it was long, right? The reason they remember it is because it was played so often. You heard it 1,000 times and just keep getting it into, you know,
Wait, hold on. Can I say in the chat, I want people to draft your preferred suggestion for a slogan. What do you think that slogan should be? Let's see if people come up with
oh, I
interesting
like that.
examples in the chat.
Exactly, by the way. Who's that? Right? Simple, truth, repeat. Right? I mean, it's simple. We need to come up with a simple message. Consumers
Stop the
pay
billionaires is a good one.
consumers pay tariffs. Right? Consumers pay tariffs. You know what was a great one? Fuck around, find out. That was a great one. But consumers, right? Tariffs or taxes. I like that. Right? That's actually a pretty good one. Tariffs
We are
are
Americans
taxes.
first.
What's that?
We are Americans first. Together forever. Love thy neighbor. We got a whole bunch.
Yeah, but
Stop stealing from us. I like that
love thy
one.
neighbor doesn't necessarily deal again with the tariff issue, which is again, that's another one. Because after you smash that whole bullshit on tariffs, then you move on to another one, and then
Yep.
another one. And then of course, Wake Up America, that's a great overall one. We should write some of these down.
Well, if someone enterprising wants to like capture them, I don't know how you do that on a computer and drop them in the chat later.
You see, Eileen, when you're right, we're better together. I agree with you. We are Republicans, Democrats, Independents, right? It's a different topic. I want people just to, again, we're talking about tariffs here. Why? Because the only one that Trump is almost even in turn, everything else he's completely underwater. Everything, all right, is his immigration. But economy is always what runs a election. As they said in the olden days, it's the economy, stupid, right? Tariffs are taxes. And then you create a 30-second play on it. Imagine if they gave it to the top 1,000 creators, right? I have like 1 million followers, all right? You have 1 million followers. That's just 2 out of 1,000. Imagine how many people will see that ad. And what I want is for the same people to see the ad multiple times. And I don't care if they use Anand's or they use Michael Cohen's or Acosta's or Don Lemon's or Lev Parnas or Malcolm's or anybody's. I don't care. Midas Touch Network, wherever you get it, you repost it to 20 more people. Before you know it, that 30-second spot has been seen now by over 200 plus million people. And you could do that in an afternoon. And you know what the cost is? Zero. The cost of the production, the cost of somebody sitting down and making that ad. That's how you do it. And you change the conversation, because nothing is changing this conversation right now, because everybody in his inner circle, oh, sure, boss. Oh, my God, what a great idea. Yeah, let's tariff the shit out of China, right? China's going to pay it. It's unequal. They've been ripping us off. There is no ripping off. Again, if you take what I was talking about, the circle of money in this economy and how it works, then you understand that it is the consumer who pays the tariffs, right? Plain and simple. That's what I would tell the DNC. Stop being so insular, which is what they are. They don't want to talk to Anand Giridharadas. Why not? Why not? You have a successful Substack. You have a successful, newspaper. You're successful in your own right. You're well-spoken. You understand the topics and the issues. You're on all social media platforms. Why would they not be bringing on somebody like yourself? Why would they not be bringing on somebody like me in order to sit down at a round table and provide them with a real roadmap for what needs to be done so that 2026 is a fucking blue tsunami that just completely engulfs everything? Why are we not talking about the First Amendment? Why are we not talking about Donald Trump's ridiculous notion of running for a third term? Even though, I wrote it on my Substack today about Trump's comments, he's not running for a third term. Well, but maybe I can, right? He always leaves that door open. How many more mountains do I have to, me, Michael Cohen Klein, before enough people in this country understand that Donald Trump weaponized the United States Department of Justice against his critics? I don't ever want to see, Anand, what happened to me happen to you. I like you too much. Even if I didn't like you, I don't want to see anybody go through the pain, mental, physical, that I went through because Bill Barr is a disgraceful piece of shit. I don't ever want to see it. I truly admire the Constitution. I respect the Constitution and the rule of law and process. We don't have that right now, my friend. And that's what we need to bring to all America. You can and will be next. When Trump, going back to tariffs, kept turning around saying, you're not going to pay it. You're not going to pay it. Oh, yeah? Why don't we go out, you and me, right now into rural, deep red America, and let's go walk through like a Walmart, a Costco, a Myers, or something like that. Let's go walk through it and show them. Oh, I don't know. In another week, half of these shelves are going to be empty. What's going to happen when you need soft lumber that generally came from Canada? Trump will tell you, oh, don't worry. We have more wood than anybody. We have more wood. I can tell you, not according to Stormy Daniels. There's no wood down there. All right? There's no wood. I'm telling you, we're going to end up losing. All right. I shouldn't do
It's a
that.
Monday, Michael. It's a Monday.
It's, I had a very long weekend. My point is, there's going to be a shortage of wood. There's a shortage of aluminum. There's going to be a shortage of steel. There's going to be a shortage of so much. And the question that I am going to ask you, why? Why does he want to do this? None of this makes any sense. I know Donald Trump for a decade and a half. I know him better than all of these guys. Trump knows what he's doing. I just can't figure out why. Because if he stopped for 1 second, stopped with the stupidity on the tariffs, if he went ahead and he brought back Kilmar Abrego Garcia, imagine if he did that. Imagine if he turned around and he didn't attack the educational system, all right, and immigrants that are here on visas studying in our schools. His numbers would rise easily by 10 points. They would. He is his own worst enemy. And as bad as he is to himself, these sycophants and enablers around him, they're just kicking him in the back of the head.
I deeply agree with that. And I want to say, and I don't want to sound like a pie in the sky dreamer, but I will say, we got to keep our eye on the ball. This is going to be a grueling 4 years. But I will say, 3 months plus in, I am a little heartened by precisely how dumbass and unpopular a form of authoritarianism he has chosen for this round. Because as you say, it could have been much more efficiently organized. That's possible. There are a lot of smart people in this country who agree with Donald Trump. He could have found them. He didn't. There's a lot of people you could put in the Department of Defense who are highly intelligent and capable and share his philosophy. He didn't do that. He didn't do that with any of the positions. And you could have imagined a version, sadly, I think in this moment in American life, there's a long list of shit you could do that is highly unlawful, but very popular.
Yep.
And he could have completely, like deporting undocumented immigrants. It's not what I would do, but probably would poll fine, right? There's a long list of like 20 things he could have done that would have, instead of taking things from people, instead of like explaining to your daughter why you can't have dolls, would have been like chicken in your pot, chicken in every pot kind of authoritarianism. Would have been just like people feeling, wow, this guy, Big Daddy's taking care of me. He could have just built bridges and used his, ignored congressional authority to put his name on a bunch of bridges or whatever, right? There is another version you could have imagined that would have been optimized for efficiency and popularity.
That's
and we
what
are instead
I would
getting,
have been doing for him.
Right. Well, but instead we're getting dumbass, unpopular authoritarianism, which is not going to be pretty and is still going to have a lot of difficulty for a lot of people. But I do think it has made him subject to gravity over these last 3 months. Like, he's bleeding support. Like, the world still works. The hydraulics of politics still works, right? I would have been worried if he'd had these 3.5 months and his numbers were the same, but his numbers are not the same. Like, gravity still works. People are not stupid. People are like, oh, he's hurting my family. People are evolving because of that.
Perfect point. It is the hurting of, look, he doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about Democrats at all. We didn't vote for him. He doesn't care. The problem is you cannot disassociate Democrats from independents, from Republicans, when you are doing stupid tariff bills. You just can't. Who's already getting hurt? It's already been demonstrated. People who are getting hurt are, as an example, farmers. 80% of the soy produced in this country was going to China. China now gave them the two-finger salute. They're sitting that they're going to now sell this into the open market. It's a ton of soy. There was no reason for this damage. It makes no sense at all. And the one thing before, because I know we have to go in a few minutes, but the one thing that I say to each and every one of you, we have a good little crowd here, just about 4,000 people. Next time I'm on with Anand, we need 10,000 people, and then 50,000, and then 100. Let me explain to what you can do. People are every single day at Yale, every single day when I'm walking in the streets in New York, every day when I'm anywhere. People say, I feel helpless. What can I do? Support Anand. Support Michael Cohen. Support Midas Touch Network. Support independent journalism. Why? Because this is where you're going to get facts and truth. We don't have to answer to corporate enterprise who are concerned that Trump is going to shut them down. Join a community, join multiple communities. You see, like if I'm going to go do a gigantic rally, which I'm planning on doing soon in DC, I'm calling my friend Anand. I'm going to call Acosta. I'm going to call Don Lemon. I'm going to call Malcolm and Midas Touch and everybody. And then we're going to all combine our communities so that we are so big that no one can shut us up. You don't need CBS. We have more people following us cumulatively than CBS has viewers. Look at just Midas Touch Network's numbers as an example. They're bigger now than Fox News in terms of their digital platform. This is what we need to do to get the word out, to insulate ourselves into a community, and do not stop. Share it with your friends. Share my Substack. Share Anand's Substack. Share our Substacks with as many friends as you can. In that way, when we go live with issues, boom, there we go. We're on.
I love that. Button right here. If you haven't joined either or both of our Substacks, you can do that right now. Tell us in the chat if you're doing it as we speak. I love it when people do it in real time. It's a lot of fun. Michael, are you going to juggle for us before we go, or is that going to be for another time?
That's another time. That'll be my next act.
Okay. Well, you did claim it. So in the spirit of truthful journalism, I am going to need to verify that at some point in the near future. But buddy, always so good to talk to you, and
my friend.
Stay safe, and we'll talk
Please,
very soon.
everybody, again, last time, subscribe, watch, comment, and share. That's the most important thing that you could do right now, as we are going to be heading into the midterms.
There are more of us. I say that every day. There are more of us.
Thank God for that. Anand, great seeing you, brother.
Great to see you as always.
Thanks, pal.